Well, we can speak now to the Director of the Centre of US Politics at University College London, Mr. Thomas Gift. Thanks for your time. Firstly, we're just hearing at the end of that report some of the human rights that Donald Trump wants to address. He wants to get rid of transgender rights. To what extent will Donald Trump have the power to do things like that?
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you. The first thing you see is a unified Republican Congress. So Republicans are going to hold both the House and the Senate. So you would think that that would mean that it would be smooth sailing for Donald Trump to get through any piece of legislation that he wants. But in fact, it's going to require compromise, particularly in the Senate, because you need 60 votes to override what's called a filibuster, which essentially delays the ability of a bill to get to the floor and pass. So certainly Donald Trump has a lot of momentum. He has what he perceives as a mandate going into this first 100 days. But at the same time, there's a lot of disagreement, of course, between Republicans and Democrats. And also there's disagreement on some of these issues among Republicans as well. There's the MAGA wing of the party, and then there's the more establishment wing of the party. So anything that Donald Trump wants to get through is going to require some compromise.
OK, so he doesn't have a complete free rein. But we're also looking at where power does lie today in US politics. And Elon Musk doesn't have an official role inside the administration. But again, even in this pre-inaugural ceremony, we're seeing Elon Musk right alongside Donald Trump. He's already been meeting with the Chinese vice president who's there for the inauguration. You know, is Elon Musk the one that's really going to be pulling many of the strings?
Well, certainly Democrats keep saying that America is going to have a co-president in Elon Musk. And I think that there's something to that, of course. I mean, he played such a momentous role in the campaign, donated up to $75 million of his own money, probably the best money he spent to get Donald Trump elected, at least in his view. But he's really been partnering closely with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago when it comes to personnel decisions, when it comes to sort of policy decisions as well. So he is exercising enormous influence, which of course does raise some concerns about conflicts of interest and the extent to which you have an unelected representative pulling the strings in such a significant way.
And, you know, already Trump's first term in office, we saw, you know, him really a hardline stance on many foreign policy issues, but notably towards China and putting tariffs on. And for this, he actually invited the Chinese president to his inaugurational ceremony. So are we already seeing that influence?
Well, I still think that there's going to be tough on China rhetoric coming out of this administration. It's kind of the one issue on which both Democrats and Republicans can agree. He has threatened upwards of 60% tariffs on imports from China. I think that this is something that he is serious about. He didn't seem to mind waging a trade war during his first administration, and he thinks that this is a political winner in his second administration. Sort of tariffs have been the one issue in which Donald Trump has been ideologically consistent, even dating back before he was president in 2017. So I wouldn't be surprised if right away, given that this doesn't require any congressional approval, Donald Trump can essentially do this unilaterally through executive action. If we see at least some tariffs, maybe not upwards of 60%, but some tariffs added to what's already there.
Okay, so that could be one of the earlier moves he makes. We're also hearing in that pre-inaugural rally, he mentioned the deportation issue, saying he'll carry out the biggest deportation in US history. Again, does he have the power to do that quite rapidly? Could that be one of his first executive orders?
Well, some of this can be done unilaterally, but some of it requires congressional approval. And saying that you're going to carry out the biggest deportation in American history is quite something. I'm not sure if he actually has a real on-the-ground plan yet on how to do this. I mean, most of it has been rather vague. Conceivably, he's going to sort of prioritize undocumented immigrants in terms of identifying them and then trying to deport them, those who have, for example, criminal background records and so on. But it's a massive undertaking, of course. Republicans and Democrats haven't been able to agree on comprehensive immigration reform for decades. So Trump certainly is limited in what he can do there.
Now, there's other issues that we maybe hear a little bit less of, but I have read that the Federal Department of Education, Trump basically wants to get rid of it at a federal level and bring it back to state level. What impact do you think that will have on the United States? And are there other things like this on his agenda?
I would say that I doubt that that happens. I think you might see some spending cuts at the Department of Education, but eliminating it entirely will be a challenging thing to do. Donald Trump is not the first president, particularly Republican, who has wanted to eliminate the Department of Education. This has sort of gone back decades and decades and decades. Hasn't happened, and I doubt that it will happen this time around either.
And going back to something we have heard Donald Trump say many a time, but on that international front again, the war with Ukraine, how much of an influence do you think Donald Trump will have? How different might that be from the outgoing administration?
Well, of course, during the campaign, Donald Trump notoriously said that the war would be over in 24 hours once he actually took office. It's obvious that that's not going to occur. Still, I do think that this administration is likely to put more pressure on Ukraine behind the scenes to reach some type of a compromise, some type of a deal. It's really hard to say what's going on sort of behind closed doors, but I think you're going to see less of a kind of open checkbook for Kyiv than you did under the Biden administration.
Okay, interesting. And our correspondent in Jerusalem a little bit earlier was saying that the ceasefire that has just come into place for Gaza, that the longevity of that and the future of that will also be impacted by the relationship between Donald Trump and Israel. How do you see things shaping up there?
Well, I'm not a U.S. foreign policy expert, but I can say that, I think Trump has signaled to Netanyahu more that he has a green light for kind of carrying out his war if the ceasefire does end. I'll just leave it at that.
Finally, Thomas Gift, this is the first convicted criminal going into the White House. What do you think that means for U.S. democracy?
Well, I think Donald Trump represents a challenge for U.S. democracy. I don't think that he represents an existential threat, though. And I think that this is one of the big mistakes that Democrats made during the campaign, to say that Donald Trump could really end U.S. democracy. That's certainly an overstatement. But at the same time, if you look at what Trump did during his first administration, attacking the free press, attacking congressional oversight, attacking executive norms and institutions, I think that there is concern to be worried. And particularly when it comes to using the FBI, for example, or the Department of Justice as kind of a personal apparatus to go after political adversaries. That's something that we need to be mindful of, something that Donald Trump has threatened explicitly to do. Whether he'll follow through on that is unclear.
Thomas Gift of the University College London, thanks indeed for joining us and giving us your time and expertise. Much appreciated.